Greetings, beloved friends, and welcome to the 30th Sunday of Ordinary Time Year B. Welcome also to today's edition of Homily Highlights by Father Emmanuel Nazimako Asogwa. Our theme for today is the blind Bartimaeus and us, lessons from his positive attitude. You may well remember that for the past 2 Sundays we've been talking about quests. 2 Sundays ago, we saw a rich man that had a good quest, a genuine quest, but lacked the concomitant commitment towards that quest. And so he came to Jesus happy and went away sad. Just last Sunday also, the readings also provided us with the beautiful story of James and John, sons of Zebedee, who had also a very lofty, beautiful, holy ambition. But yet, ambition was still deficient because it was somehow vaulting, and it concentrated on the reward and not on the service. It concentrated on the prideful position without realizing that service, sacrifice, will go before the reward of sacrifice, which actually is now the position. Sacrifice becomes the hallmark of greatness. And Jesus was quick to redirect their mind. They accepted, and today we have Saint James and John. In fact, James became the first Christian martyr, and John lived a total life of witnessing until his death. The difference between the rich young man of 2 Sundays ago and James and John of last Sunday was in the fact that James and John eventually took the correction that Jesus gave, and they were prepared to lay down their life. Fortunately and joyfully today we have now the story of another man who had a quest, a beautiful quest, and was able to realize that quest. That man is the blind Bartimaeus. We are touched by his story, not just because in our own varied and various dimensions we are all blind, but also importantly because his attitude to Jesus and to his situation leaves us a barrage of great lessons. Hence, our theme. Let us begin first of all by realizing how blind we are. My dear brothers and sisters, we are blind in our own ways. We are blind physically when we cannot see physically, when we have eye problems, maybe short sight, long sight, glaucoma, anything, blindness, total blindness. Or when there is any aspect of our lives where we lack capacity, physical capacity, when there is any iota of incapacitation in our physical abilities, these are forms of physical blindness. But we are not just physically blind, we are also blind spiritually. We are blind spiritually when we can no longer see the damage that sin is doing to our souls. We are blind spiritually when we can no longer see much harm, the kind of spiritual accidents that will subject our bodies and our souls to. We are blind spiritually when we can no longer see or feel the presence of God around us. When Jesus is before us, we can't see him, we can't connect with him. It is a form of spiritual blindness. Pretty much like what happened to Mary Magdalene in John 21 when he was looking for Jesus and Jesus was just there because she was so hemmed in her own depression and frustration. She didn't realize that Jesus was already before her. Just like so many of us who are caught up in depression, in anxiety and worry, are blind even to the alluring and soothing presence of God around their lives. We find ourselves in the story, the beautiful story of Luke chapter 24, the 2 brothers on the way to Emmaus, who also temporarily were blind to the presence of Jesus, because for them their hopes had been dashed and their aspirations had lost, and they had left Jerusalem and were now going to Emmaus, and their journey was now towards sunset, because as they were going, it was getting darker. Jesus rescued them actually from that blindness, and they eventually saw Jesus in the Eucharistic encounter. We also remember 2 Kings. We remember Gehazi, who was blind to the assuring presence of God around him, And so his master had to ask God to open his eyes, and he realized that he had a battalion of angels in their favor. We are blind when we cannot see the presence of God. We cannot see the mercies of God surrounding us. We cannot feel the protection of God. We cannot see ourselves surrounded by beneficence and munificence of God. We are blind. We are blind, my dear brothers and sisters, when we do not see the shortness of life, when we do not see the vanity of this life. We are blind. We are blind spiritually. We are blind indeed. When we cannot appreciate the marvels of God. Like the responsorial psalm of today says, what marvels the Lord has worked for us. When we cannot see the goodness of God around our lives. When we cannot see the goodness of God in creation, Psalm 24 says that even creation reveals the loftiness and goodness of God. When we cannot see the goodness of God in creation, the goodness of God around our lives, the marvels of God, we are blind. We are blind spiritually, truly, when indeed we cannot see the opportunities, spiritual opportunities that God has provided for us. Just like Bartimaeus saw his own today, we are blind. When we are not sensitive to all of the second chances that God is giving us in our lives to make amends, to come nearer to Him, when we cannot see His appeals, when we cannot see where He's leading us to, His direction, His appeals, His sermons, we are blind. When we do not have a vision about our own spiritual destiny, we are blind. We are blind, my dear brothers and sisters, when we are not even aware that our spiritual lantern has been extinguished, that our spiritual candle is going down. Pretty much like the famous story of a blind man who was given a lantern by his friend to walk, so that his friend, those who were coming, because it was about to rain, so that those who were running away from rain would avoid him because it was already dark. And he carried that lantern without knowing that the breeze had extinguished the lantern. And he was carrying the lantern, an empty lantern, until somebody knocked him down. When he was aggrieved and he was angry and questioned why somebody should knock him down, the person apologized and said he didn't know he was passing by because his lantern had been put off without his knowing that. Why did he not realize that his lantern had been put off? Because he was blind. We are blind when we do no longer understand that our spiritual candles have been extinguished. But the light of God's grace in us is dead. We are blind. We are blind, my dear brothers and sisters, when we cannot see where He's showing us spiritually. When we come to moral blindness, we are blind when we can't see or feel the pains of those who are around us. The pains. We can't see the pains written in their face. In fact, what love is, true love is to be sensitive to others' pains, is to see it in their eyes. In Igbo, they say, Ifunanya. And Ifunanya means Ifunanya. So we are blind if we can't feel the pains of people, even when we look at them. We can't feel the needs of people. There are those who are completely blind to the needs of those who are around them. Even whilst making names as philanthropists in the social order, in the internet, and yet some of those of their closest and nearest are smothering under hardship. They are blind to those who are around them. They are blind to the call of duty. They are blind to the pains and struggles, just like the politicians of today, who no longer feel the pains of the suffering masses, who seem not to see what is happening, who seem not to see what people are undergoing in the present Nigeria, who seem really completely blind to the plight of those whom they have vowed to protect and to lead. We are blind when, as religious leaders, we do not see the pains of those who have been entrusted to us. We are blind. We are blind when we cannot see our neighbor as our brother. In fact, I read a story somewhere when somebody was doing an investigation. He wanted to know actually when dawn breaks, when actually night gives way to dawn. And so he kept awake. In the night, he would wake and he would try to know when actually darkness yielded to light, when it transited from light to morning. It wasn't possible for him because each time he would fall asleep and eventually wake up when it was already morning. And so he asked the wise man, when actually does the day break? When actually does it become dawn? And the wise man said, the day only dawns when you can see your brother as your brother, when you can see a neighbor as your brother, when you can see another human being as your brother. If you can recognize the face of God in another human being, that is when the day dawns for you. Otherwise, you are still blind. You are still in darkness. If you cannot see in the face of another an image of God, a brother, a neighbor, we are blind if we can't see the possibilities in those who are around us, the beautiful possibilities that they have. We are blind if we cannot appreciate or see the goodness and efforts of those who around us are making. It could be our lieutenants. It could be those who are under us. It could be those who are under our care. The little efforts that make, if we can't see them, we are blind. We can go on and go on. We are blind morally if we do not see those who are suffering, like the rich man, the verse of Luke chapter 16. When we do not see, when we do not feel sympathy for them. The second reading of today tells us that Jesus, as a high priest, is so sympathetic to our cause because he has undergone the sufferings we are undergoing. That's why he's able to see and feel our pains. If we do not do his part, we are blind. We are blind socially when we do not see the differences among us, when we do not recognize our uniquenesses, when we do not see possibilities around us. We are blind. We are blind psychologically when we do not even appreciate our own makeup, what God has implanted in us. We are blind. So we can go on and go on and go on, but everybody today must ask themselves, how blind am I? Those who thought they were seeing today, they were blind even to the opportunity that Jesus was presenting by passing along their streets. And from Bartimaeus, a man who obviously was physically blind but spiritually very highly sighted, we can learn a lot. What do we learn from Bartimaeus? First of all, we learn sensitivity. We learn spiritual sight. He was able to see his opportunity and cash in on his own opportunity. He was able to realize that Jesus was passing by, and he decided to catch that opportunity. Every day Jesus passes our streets. Every Eucharistic celebration, Jesus passes our streets. In everybody who is suffering around us, Jesus passes our streets. But how many of us are not blind enough to see him? Bartimaeus, though physically blind, was not spiritually blind. He was already intellectually and spiritually sighted to be able to see Jesus. Sensitivity. You can also talk about intellectual blindness when your intellect cannot grasp anything. So we learn sensitivity from Bartimaeus, but also we learn resilience and doggedness. That's number 2. He was able to stand firm. He didn't just have that law of recognition like Mike Murdoch would say. He also had the tenacity to hold on despite oppositions, despite attacks from people who are always hypocritical. This is our word also today. People will always praise you when you are now successful. But the same people who praised you will be the same people who were condemning you. Once you become successful, everybody begins to pander to your gallery. You pass this road, people are telling you that it's not a good road, but you succeed in it and people start giving you titles. This is the hypocritical world in which we live today. Bartimaeus knew what he wanted, and so he kept on and held on despite the dissuasions. And the same people that condemned him were now the same people that now encouraged him and said, take heart, the master is calling you. Bartimaeus teaches us resilience. He teaches us sensitivity. He teaches us urgency. He didn't waste time. That's number 3. He didn't waste time. Immediately he learned that it was Jesus that was passing. He didn't delay. Because procrastination, as I always say, is often the ruin of destination. Bartimaeus also teaches us courage. He didn't say, oh, because I'm begging now. And he was able to get up in spite of himself. Because even yourself can be a limitation to what you want. Once you continue to enter into self-pity, you continue to feel you cannot do it. You continue to feel you cannot make a way for yourself. But he did not rely on anybody to make the request. He had the courage enough, despite himself, to shout and to shout and to shout. He didn't allow himself to become a barrier. He teaches us courage. He teaches us courage. Bartimaeus, number 5, teaches us firm faith and trust. Immediately Jesus stopped. Despite the silence of Jesus, he kept shouting. But when Jesus stopped and said, come over, he threw away the things he was using to beg. Meaning he already had faith, he was not coming back to it. He realized that the prophecy of the first reading of today was now going to be realized in Jesus Christ. That beautiful prophecy we have in the person of today, which we now find in the gospel actualized in the person of Christ. Bartimaeus had faith that this is the son of David who would fulfill that prophecy and that his own time of redemption has come. How many of us have that kind of living faith? That today is my own time of redemption. So he threw away all the things that he was using when he was blind and then ran to Jesus. And then we see also focus and precision. He knew what he wanted. So many of us don't know what we want in life. We don't actually know what we are looking for. But Bartimaeus, we learn it from him as number 6. And number 7, we learn gratitude. Immediately he was healed, he followed Jesus all through. My dear brothers and sisters, what are you taking from Bartimaeus today? This Eucharistic encounter is your own Jericho walk. I pray for you and I pray for myself that we may realize our different blindness and that we may say, Jesus, Son of David, we seize the opportunity during this Mass, and that Jesus, as always, will respond and heal my blindness and heal your blindness so that our life will be a life of joy and gratitude, even as I bless you now. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you. Continue to help us impact the world by sharing and by subscribing. Thank you. Bye.